March 27, 1945. 11:42 a.m. Over the Seto Inland Sea, Japan, 30,000 feet above a burning empire. The first impact doesn't sound like metal. It sounds like a hammer striking a cathedral bell, deep, hollow, and wrong. Inside the aluminum body of the B-29 Little One, the vibration ripples through the fuselage, rattling oxygen masks, shaking loose spent .50 caliber casings that skitter across the floor like coins. For half a second, no one speaks. Then the intercom explodes with voices. Jesus, what the hell was that? Captain Robert L. Morgan, aircraft commander, tightens his grip on the yoke. The control column fights him, shuddering as if the airplane itself is in pain. Warning lights flicker. The Superfortress, for right are 3350 engines, pressurized cabin, America's most advanced bomber, has just been hit by something that wasn't flak. It was a fighter, and it didn't pull away. You could almost feel the altitude here. The thin, murderous cold seeping through flight gloves. The constant hiss of oxygen. Frost crawling along the inside of the plexiglass nose. Outside, the sky is a hard, brilliant blue, so clear it feels cruel. Fighter at 3 o'clock. Closing fast. Second Lieutenant James O'Neill, the right blister gunner, swings his turret. A Japanese Ki-43 Hayabusa flashes into view. Too close. Far too close. Its propeller disc fills the sight picture, the pilot's canopy visible for a split second. Then it hits. Not a glancing blow. A deliberate one. The Ki-43 slams into the B-29's right-wing root, tearing away metal, fabric, flesh. The fighter disintegrates in a spray of debris and flame, vanishing beneath the bomber like a dropped match. The B-29 lurches violently, losing altitude. Someone yells, "They're ramming us!" Morgan doesn't answer. He's already fighting the nose back up, forcing the bomber level while his co-pilot, First Lieutenant Charles McGee, scans the engine gauges. Number 3's overheating. Fuel pressure's unstable. Below them, Japan stretches out in hazy greens and grays. Cities, rivers, rail lines. Targets. But the mission has just changed. Because the sky is suddenly full of enemies. 14 Japanese fighters are climbing toward them, their silhouettes sharp against the sun. Ki-84 Franks. A 6 M0s. Older models. Desperate models. Pilots who know the war is lost, and are flying anyway. You don't need a briefing to understand what that means. The B-29 formation has drifted. Cloud cover, jet stream turbulence, flak avoidance. Whatever the reason, Little One is exposed. A straggler. And every Japanese pilot knows the rule. Kill the straggler. Tail! 6 o'clock high! Staff Sergeant William H. Turner, tail gunner, squeezes the triggers. Twin .50s roar to life, their recoil thumping through the rear pressure bulkhead. Tracers arc outward, bright and steady. One fighter breaks off, smoke trailing. Another doesn't. It comes straight in. Closing! Closing! He's not breaking! The zero keeps coming, gun silent. No deflection. No evasive move. Just a straight, suicidal line. Brace! The second impact rips through the tail section. The B-29 bucks like a wounded animal. The pressure system fails with a violent whump, and freezing air floods the rear compartment. Turner is thrown against his harness, ears ringing, oxygen mask yanked tight. The Zero shears apart on contact, its wings slicing into the bomber's fuselage before disappearing into open sky. 2 fighters. 2 ramming attacks. And the battle has barely begun. Inside the aircraft, damage reports stack up fast. Hydraulics are sluggish. Control cables feel mushy. Right wing's leaking fuel. Morgan forces himself to breathe slowly. Panic kills crews faster than enemy fire. He scans the horizon. The fighters are regrouping, circling like sharks, staying just outside effective gun range. They're learning. And so is he. Gunners, Morgan says into the intercom, his voice steady despite the chaos. They're not all trying to shoot us down. A pause. They're trying to tear us apart. The Japanese fighters dive in pairs now, one firing to draw attention, the other climbing underneath, angling for engines, wings, cockpit glass. The B-29's guns chatter almost constantly. The smell of cordite mixes with oil and hot metal. You can feel the tension stretching, seconds between attacks shrinking, each pass closer than the last. A Ki-84 explodes under concentrated fire from the top turret. Another peels away trailing flame, spiraling down toward the sea. The crew counts kills automatically, mechanically, because counting keeps fear at bay. But the fighters keep coming. And then Morgan sees something that makes his stomach drop. One of the remaining Zeros isn't lining up on a gun position. It's lining up on the cockpit. Straight on. Dead center. No guns firing. No attempt to pull away. Just a pilot, committed to the final option. Morgan shouts a single word into the intercom, one that freezes every man on board. Rammer. The Zero grows rapidly in the windscreen, filling it completely. And this time, there may be no room left to maneuver. The Zero fills the windscreen. Not a blur. Not a streak. A face. For a fraction of a second, no more than a heartbeat, Captain Robert Morgan can see the Japanese pilot through the canopy glass. Goggles. A scarf snapping violently in the slipstream. Hands locked forward. There is no hesitation in his posture. No fear that Morgan can see. Only intent. Hang on. Morgan shouts, wrenching the yoke hard left. The B-29 responds sluggishly, wounded hydraulics lagging behind human instinct. The Zero clips the nose instead of hitting dead center, its wings slicing across the plexiglass bombardier's dome. The world erupts. Glass explodes inward. Wind screams through the cockpit with the sound of tearing canvas. The Zero disintegrates, its engine block slamming past the cockpit and vanishing below. Shards of plexiglass slice through charts, wiring, flesh. Second Lieutenant Frank Delaney, the bombardier, is thrown backward, blood instantly freezing across his flight suit. The nose compartment depressurizes completely. The temperature plunges. For a terrifying second, Morgan can't see anything. Then the wind clears the debris. The cockpit is gone, half of it ripped open to the sky. "You still with us?" McGee yells, his voice strained, almost lost in the roar. Morgan nods once. His face is bleeding, but his hands are steady. He forces the Superfortress back into level flight. Behind them, the fighters scatter, momentarily shocked by the near miss. The B-29 has survived its third ramming attempt. 3. But survival is becoming arithmetic now. Every maneuver costs altitude. Every second bleeds fuel. And the fighters haven't given up. They're adapting. Engine 2's coughing. Fire in number 3, trying to feather. Tail guns are icing up. The aircraft commander listens, prioritizes, responds. Training takes over where fear would normally live. Morgan orders the bomb load jettisoned, not because the mission has failed, but because weight is now the enemy. The bombs fall away, tumbling uselessly toward the patchwork of land and water below. The fighters return. This time, they don't ram. They swarm. A coordinated attack, front, rear, high, low. The sky fills with tracers, white and red lines crossing in lethal geometry. The B-29's gunners work in brutal synchronization, calling targets, adjusting lead, firing in short, disciplined bursts. Top turret, a Zero shredded mid-roll. Ball turret, a Ki-43 bursts into flame beneath the fuselage. Tail. Another fighter snaps apart, wing folding like paper. The kill count climbs. 5, 6, 7. But the cost is mounting. Staff Sergeant Turner reports numb hands, his oxygen line frosting over. The waist gunners are firing almost blind, eyes burning, faces stiff with cold. The aircraft shudders continuously, its frame protesting forces it was never designed to endure. Then comes the worst sound any bomber crew can hear. Silence. Engine number 3 dies completely. The B-29 yaws violently. Morgan counters with rudder, muscles screaming as he fights asymmetric thrust. Losing one engine is survivable. Losing two, especially on the same wing, is a death sentence at this altitude. And the fighters sense it. They press closer now, emboldened. One Key 84 lines up beneath the dead engine, firing upward into the nacelle, trying to ignite leaking fuel. Another Zero dives head-on again, but this time pulls up at the last second, passing so close its wingtip scrapes metal. Psychological warfare. They want the crew to flinch. Morgan doesn't. "Hold fire until you have the shot," he orders calmly. "Make them pay for every pass." The next attack is a mistake by the Japanese. Two fighters converge on the same angle, misjudging speed and spacing. The top turret opens up. One fighter explodes instantly. The other clips the debris, loses control, and spirals away. 9. Smoke trails mark the sky like chalk lines. But then the formation tightens again, and one remaining fighter climbs above them, positioning perfectly for a final dive. Morgan sees it too late. The fighter pitches nose down, accelerating rapidly. No guns firing. No evasive movement. Another ram. Morgan slams the yoke forward and to the right, forcing the B-29 into a shallow dive. The maneuver buys inches, just enough. The fighter's propeller slices through the vertical stabilizer, ripping away control surfaces. The tail gunner screams as the aircraft bucks violently. The Zero disintegrates, vanishing into fragments and fire. The B-29 is still flying. Barely. 10. But now the Superfortress is crippled. Controls are spongy. The tail is partially gone. Fuel is draining. The Japanese fighters break off momentarily, reassessing. Morgan looks at his instruments, then out at the shattered horizon. He knows the truth. They can't outrun the next attack. They can't climb. And they can't take another hit. Then McGee says something quietly, something that changes everything. "Sir, they're forming up again." Morgan follows his gaze. 4 fighters remain. And they're lining up, one after another. Not to shoot. To die. The sky goes strangely quiet. No scattered passes. No chaotic angles. The remaining Japanese fighters slide into a loose line astern, spacing themselves with unsettling precision. 4 aircraft. 4 pilots. Each one holding steady, noses pointed toward the wounded B-29 like arrows drawn back on a bowstring. Captain Robert Morgan knows what he's seeing. This isn't combat anymore. It's execution, planned, deliberate, final. "Gunners," he says evenly, forcing calm into every syllable. "This is it. No spray. No panic. Pick one target. Kill it. Then move to the next." Inside the aircraft, every man understands. Ammunition is finite. Bodies are exhausted. The Superfortress is barely responding to control input. But discipline is the one thing they still own. The first fighter dives. It comes in from high 6 o'clock, building speed rapidly, sunlight flashing off its canopy. The tail guns open fire in a controlled burst. Tracers walk up the fuselage, stitching the aircraft from tail to cockpit. The fighter erupts into flame, gone before it can even flinch. 3 left. The second comes from below, aiming for the weakened right wing. The ball turret rotates, firing upward at an impossible angle. The fighter jerks violently, clips the wing with debris, and cartwheels away trailing smoke. 2. But the B-29 shudders from the near miss. The right wing dips dangerously. Morgan fights the controls, sweat freezing on his skin. Then both remaining fighters attack together. One head-on. One from the rear. Front! 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 The nose gunner fires through shattered plexiglass, hands numb, teeth clenched. The head-on Zero keeps coming, absorbing hits, pieces flying off. At the last instant, it veers upward too late. The top turret catches it mid-climb. It explodes in a bright orange flash against the blue sky. One left. And that's when Morgan realizes something terrifying. The last fighter isn't diving. It's climbing. Climbing above the bomber, slowly, deliberately, conserving energy. Setting up the perfect vertical ram, straight down through the fuselage. There's no gun coverage above them anymore. The top turret is jammed, hydraulics failing completely. Top turret's dead, comes the call. Morgan's mind races. Dive? The controls won't allow it. Turn? Too slow. The fighter crests above them, momentarily silhouetted against the sun. Then it drops. For the first time in the entire battle, Morgan does something reckless. He cuts power. All remaining engines pulled back hard. The B-29 lurches as thrust disappears. Airspeed collapses. The nose drops unexpectedly. The Japanese pilot, committed and accelerating, misjudges the sudden loss of speed. The fighter screams past, missing by feet. Every gun that can still fire opens up. The sky detonates. The final fighter disintegrates in a cloud of flame, metal, and smoke. 14 fighters. Silence returns. Only the wind remains, howling through the torn nose, over the broken tail, around a bomber that should not still exist. Inside Little One, no one cheers. They're too busy realizing they're still alive. Then reality crashes back in. "Sir," McGee says quietly. "We're losing altitude fast." Morgan nods. He already knows. They're flying on borrowed physics now. Damaged wings, shredded tail, 2 dead engines, fuel pouring out somewhere behind them. Japan is falling away beneath them, but home is still hundreds of miles over open ocean. The enemy is gone. The war, for them, is not. Morgan sets a course anyway. West, toward nothing but water and hope. Behind him, the crew begins damage control with shaking hands, plugging holes with parachutes, redistributing weight, tending to the wounded. The bombardier is alive but fading. Frostbite is setting in. Oxygen is running low. And still, the aircraft flies. Barely. As the coastline disappears behind them, Morgan allows himself one thought, just one. If the ocean takes us, it won't be because we quit. The Superfortress limps onward, a torn shadow against the vast Pacific. And somewhere ahead, fate is waiting to decide whether this story ends in rescue or in silence. The Pacific is endless. Not blue, steel gray. Cold. Unforgiving. Hours pass in a strange, suspended state where time loses meaning. The B-29 crawls westward at reduced power, altitude bleeding away in slow, irreversible increments. Every minute is a negotiation with gravity. Captain Robert Morgan keeps his eyes locked on the instruments. Airspeed just above stall. Altitude dropping, 24,000. 23,500. 23,000. He trims constantly, making microscopic corrections, listening to the bomber the way a surgeon listens to a patient's breathing. The aircraft groans with every adjustment. Behind him, the crew works in near silence. Not from discipline, but exhaustion. Fingers are swollen. Faces are gray. Oxygen masks hiss unevenly as supply dwindles. Someone coughs, a wet, dangerous sound in this cold. Fuel status? Morgan asks. McGee doesn't answer immediately. Not good. They all know what that means. The right-wing tank is hemorrhaging fuel. They've tried everything. Canvas plugs, emergency sealant, even pieces of clothing stuffed into the rupture. Nothing holds for long. The fuel gauge needle keeps creeping toward empty. The math is brutal. They don't have enough fuel to reach base. Which means Morgan has only one real decision left. Where they go down. The sun begins to sink behind them, stretching the B-29 shadow across the clouds like a broken cross. Temperatures drop further. Ice creeps along the wings, adding weight they cannot afford. Then the tail gunner speaks again, voice hoarse. Captain, I'm losing control back here. The partial loss of the vertical stabilizer is catching up with them. Yaw increases. The bomber begins to fishtail slightly, subtle, but deadly at low airspeed. Morgan swallows. Prep the crew, he says. Possible ditching. No one argues. Life rafts are dragged into position. Wounded men are strapped in as securely as possible. Parachutes, mostly useless over open water at this altitude, are checked anyway. Because checking gives the hand something to do besides shake. You could almost feel the weight of the decision pressing down on the cockpit. Ditching a B-29 is a nightmare. The aircraft isn't designed for it. Hit the water wrong, and it will break apart instantly. Hit it right and maybe. Morgan studies the sea ahead. Wave patterns. Wind streaks. The angle of light. He lines the aircraft up parallel to the swells. Textbook, if such a word still matters. Then, unexpectedly, something flickers on the horizon. A shape. Low. Gray. Morgan squints. McGee leans forward. Sir, is that? A ship. American. A destroyer, cutting through the water far below, and like in the vastness of the ocean. For the first time since Japan, hope enters the cockpit. A destroyer, cutting through the water far below, and like in the vastness of the ocean. For the first time since Japan, hope enters the cockpit. Morgan keys the radio, his voice raw but controlled. Mayday, mayday. This is Army Air Forces B-29, heavy damage, low fuel, preparing to ditch. Do you read? Static. Then, crackling, distant, unmistakable. Aircraft calling mayday. This is U.S. Navy destroyer USS Hughes. We read you. Repeat. We read you. The cockpit exhales as one. Morgan brings the bomber lower, carefully, painfully. Every foot lost is irreversible. The destroyer grows larger, sailors visible on deck now, scrambling. Fuel pressure wavers. Now, McGee whispers. If we're going to do it. Morgan nods. He brings the B-29 down to just above stall speed, nose slightly high, wings level as best he can manage. The sea rushes up. Brace for impact. The water hits like concrete. The bomber slams down, skips once, twice, then digs in. Metal screams. The fuselage tears. Water floods in violently. And then, stillness. For a breathless second, the aircraft floats. Then it begins to break. Out! 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 The crew scrambles, dragging wounded men, hauling rafts free. Cold water swallows boots, then legs, then waists. The Pacific is merciless, stealing breath instantly. But the rafts deploy. Sailors from the destroyer are already launching boats, racing toward them through debris and fuel slicks. Morgan is the last out. He turns once, looking back at Little One, the bomber that fought 14 fighters, survived ramming attacks, crossed an ocean on hope alone. Then it slips beneath the waves. The war for them is over. But the story isn't. Because what happened in that sky over Japan will not stay there. It will be counted, confirmed, and it will shock even the men who won the war. The debriefing room smells like coffee and damp wool. Captain Robert Morgan sits at a plain wooden table, wrapped in a borrowed Navy blanket, hands still trembling despite his effort to keep them still. Around him, his crew occupies mismatched chairs, some bandaged, some hollow-eyed, all exhausted beyond words. Across the table, an intelligence officer flips through a clipboard, brow furrowed deeper with every page. "Let's go through this again," the officer says carefully. "You're stating 14 enemy fighters destroyed?" Morgan nods once. "Confirmed by multiple gun positions. Visual explosions. Mid-air breakups. Ramming impacts." The officer exhales slowly. "Captain, that's more than some entire groups claim in a month." A second officer, this one Air Force, leans forward. "You're also reporting for attempted ramming attacks?" 5, Morgan corrects quietly. 2 succeeded. 3 failed. The room goes still. Ramming was known. It was whispered about. But this many? In a single engagement? Against one aircraft? The officers exchange looks. The crew is separated for individual statements. Hour after hour, the same details emerge, independent, consistent, unshakable. Times, angles, aircraft types, the order of attacks, the deliberate nature of the final charges. Film from gun cameras, miraculously still intact, backs them up. Frame by frame, Japanese fighters are seen diving straight in, refusing to break, vanishing in fire and debris against the Superfortress. The final tally is revised. 14 confirmed destroyed. No exaggeration. No mistake. Word spreads fast. Through the squadron. Through the group. Through the command chain. A single B-29, damaged, isolated, had survived one of the most desperate mass attacks of the Pacific War. Not by luck. Not by miracle alone. But by discipline, training, and a refusal to yield the sky. Morgan and his crew are awarded distinguished flying crosses. Citations are written in careful, restrained language, because the truth already sounds unbelievable on paper. The war ends months later. Japan surrenders. But the story of that flight doesn't fade. It becomes a case study. A warning. A testament. It proves something unsettling and profound, that even in the final days of a collapsing empire, men were willing to turn their aircraft into weapons, and that even then, courage could still meet courage at 30,000 feet. Years later, Morgan is asked about it. About the ramming attacks. About the moment he saw another pilot's face rushing toward him through the windscreen. He answers simply, "They weren't machines. They were men. Just like us." And maybe that is why the story endures. Not because 14 fighters were destroyed, but because, in that frozen sky over Japan, human will, on both sides, was pushed to its absolute limit.